get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 46th session of the weekly huddle. I am Dr. Praneeth Palamuri, an interventional cardiologist working at Care Hospital, Banjara Hills. I am joined by Dr. Anup Agarwal, who is also an interventional cardiologist working with me at Care Hospital, Banjara Hills. Most of you are already aware of the program, which is an audience level discussion where we try to bring casual hallway discussion a meaning and learn from each other from the way we practice daily. So today happens to be the World Health Day, and theme for this year 2021 is building a fairer, healthier world for everyone. Health includes both physical health and mental health, and mental health, I believe, is given less attention, and sometimes it is considered a taboo to discuss about mental health issues. So today we are discussing about thanatophobia, which I think is partly relevant to the theme of this year. So thanatophobia, when I research about it, it comes from Thanatos, where it stands for Greek god or a demon who of non-violent death, or in the phobos meaning fear. So this thanatophobia is an excessive and persistent fear of dying, or from the fear of dying process. So before I begin discussion, I would like to share about why we choose this topic. So these days, I frequently am encountering patients who are young and come with symptoms of chest pain and other symptoms which do not particularly fit into any of a specific disease or a clinical syndrome. And they usually carry a bunch of investigations done outside, all of them essentially being normal. And most of them have already Googled their symptoms, and they come to consultation room, and they want to find out the reason behind their symptoms. And after repeat questions and probing, you realize that they are anxious, and trying to find out the reason for their anxiety, it is found out that they are having this fear of dying, and they want to take things things into their control, and they want to get themselves evaluated. Most of them probably COVID-19 also has increased the incidence and prevalence of this thanatophobia, where a lot of deaths happened due to COVID-19. So today we want to discuss about thanatophobia. So today's discussion, we have few guests with us. I have Dr. Jyotirmayi, who is an consultant psychiatrist working at Continental Hospital. I also have Taranya Setupati, who is a consultant psychologist who is working at Uchwas Transitional Care Center. So, with this introduction, I will introduce the case. We'll start with inputs from first Anup, and then move forward. So, Anup, this is a 33-year-old male patient who works as a farmer who came to me with complaints of chest pain, which did not have any specific relation to activity or intake of food. It is varying both in character, severity, and duration. The pain was not associated with any symptoms of breathlessness, palpitation, syncope, no history of hypertension, diabetes, no family history of any heart diseases or sudden cardiac death. Clinical examination is essentially unremarkable. Investigations which were done outside, which he was carrying, I reviewed them. There were 5 ECGs which were all normal. He underwent 2 treadmill tests which were negative, and there was an ultrasound abdomen which was again normal other than grade 1 fatty liver. Upper endoscopy again showing some erosive gastritis findings other than nothing significant. Some blood investigations, all normal, complete blood picture, renal function, lipid profile, etc. Everything marginally here and there, nothing catching attention. So, on probing about how it all started and what's going on with him, he finally says that it all started when he realized that one of his friends has died recently, probably because of a heart attack. And this is where it all began, and he was experiencing these symptoms. So finally, I made this diagnosis of death anxiety or thanatophobia in him. So Anup, so the question to you is, did you have experience of these patients in your practice? And if someone comes to you, how do you manage this case? And how do you order any investigations? Do you refer them to anyone? And what is your take on this patient? So over to you, Anup.
Thank you, Praneeth. And I remember we discussing about this a few days ago. In my cardiological viewpoint, not a psychiatric viewpoint, but in a cardiology viewpoint, it almost seems like these are various spectrum of anxiety. These are the patients who have generalized anxiety disorder. And a lot of it is situational. I blame COVID to a large part on this, the fact that we are seeing these kind of cases far more frequently. Because a lot of these patients, they are working from home. They don't have a good setup, like a office setup at home. So many patients whom I encounter, which fit into the case that you are describing. Your case is a farmer. The kind of patients I typically see are mostly IT professionals. And they are typically working from their bed. It is not a very good office setup. The environment is not conducive. They are being pulled from various directions. Their posture is not very good. Their laptop is typically either on their lap or on the bed, as compared to office where it is elevated onto their eye level. Their back positions are not very well maintained. They are eating and drinking, being at home, they are eating and drinking in a very erratic fashion, lot more caffeine and whatnot, very less exposure to outside. There are very few people, at least whom I know or who come to me, who go outside. A majority of them, their day pretty much starts and ends in home itself. So two kind of patterns that I see. One is those patients who are absolutely fine, but who are very sensitive to their symptoms, who become very sensitive to their symptoms, that now they start reporting what I would consider it as pretty normal feeling. They would start corroborating as pathology. So you wake up in the morning, you have a little bit of neck pain because of bad posture sleeping, and a quick Google, and now it turns out that you are worried about your neck pain. Similarly, a little bit of gastritis here and there, which makes it pretty bad, and sometimes you don't even have symptoms. The second kind of patients whom I see are those patients who have some organic disease and have some symptom, but their response is quite exaggerated with that. And gastritis is a classic example of it. GI upset of any kind is a classic example of it. Sometimes a little bit of sore throat gets too much blown out of proportion. A lot of these patients, if they know somebody around who had a bad outcome, now the fear starts, now the anxiety starts, and then the entire shopping around begins. The other kind of patient subset whom I see this kind of fear are elderly population, particularly those who are living alone and have a caretaker responsibility, something like husband and wife in their 70s or 80s who are living together and basically they have caretaker responsibility for each other because they don't have kids or anybody living with them. So even a little bit of symptoms to one, again, starts increasing this fear that if I go, then what will happen to the other one? Typically happens when you have a caretaker responsibility. In the elderly population, there is less of this fear when they are living alone, but a lot of anxiety and fear when they have caretaker responsibility. And there, the problem is even multifold because if you evaluate them, sometimes you do find problems and you are not quite sure whether what you found is correlated with the symptoms what they are presenting. So, if we restrict our discussion to the young patient like the one that you had, I would work in the lines of managing generalized anxiety disorder. And the first thing what I typically do is I make sure that I have excluded all the organic pathology, which in this case, it seems like the organic pathology had been excluded. I typically don't go that far out to do invasive assessments like endoscopy or whatnot, unless there is a lead in the non-invasive assessment. But I first make sure that the organic disease has been taken care of. Once that is taken care of, then I start looking at the cause finding exercise, which means why is this concerned? And often I find home restricted environment being one of the concern. Like in this particular patient whose colleague had a MI, I start looking at risk profile of the colleague so that at least I can counsel the patient saying that your colleague was of a different risk profile than you are. And because you don't share the kind of risks that your colleague does, you don't need to worry as much as your colleague had to. Sometimes there is an obvious precipitant, smoker, diabetes, family history, and whatnot, which your index case may not have, and that needs to be brought out. That may give confidence. Sometimes I do end up doing a definitive test to alleviate their anxiety. Sometimes, even if their chest pain are atypical, I sometimes end up doing a CT angiography of the chondries, just to show them that, your chondries are normal, you'll be fine, so that that anxiety kind of goes down a little bit. Of course, I have to do a risk profiling, make sure their creatinine is okay and everything else is fine before I subject them to contrast study. But that also helps alleviate the anxiety. And then the most important thing that I have found is to get them out of their home, to get them out of their restricted space, come out to the nature, start doing some exercise. We are social animals, so start socializing, talk to people. The whole concept of social distancing has to be changed into physical distancing, not particularly social distancing. WHO mentioned it very clearly that social distancing has a negative connotation to it, where people are now isolating themselves. They don't need to isolate themselves. They just need to physically isolate themselves. They can still talk to their friends and family, either via phone or online or with a distance. So taking the life back, what we have lost in the last 1 year or so, to basically recalibrate ourselves in a very normal way. I think that these are some of the tools that I use. If I have to summarize the tools that I use, one is make sure organic disease is ruled out. Second, do some investigation to definitively alleviate the anxiety of the patient. Third, do risk profiling of the other case which is causing anxiety to make sure patient understands there are two different subset. And fourth, to directly address the etiology which is causing anxiety, which in the current case is mostly homebound situation. So those are some of the aspects how I go out about. Sometimes I take help of pharmaceuticals, but whenever I have to take help of pharmaceuticals, I always think of referring these patients to psychiatrists where they can address it better, particularly in young population, where I don't think long-term pharmaceuticals is a good idea. So that is typically what I do. It's an evolving field, and would love to know what other people do in this regard. Pranit.
Yeah, thanks, Anup. I agree with most of which what you said. So, not connecting with nature or not having social connections is definitely having a toll on most of them and leading to increase in incidence and prevalence of anxiety. Yeah, we'll take some input from other colleagues as well before we move to our guests. So we have Praveen with us. Praveen, what's your take on this case and what is your experience on this set of patients in your clinical practice?
Good evening, everyone. Sir, particularly since the last year after the start of the pandemic, most of the patients which we are seeing in the OP, they are just having what you call non-cardiac chest pain, and they are just what you call doing just like the window shopping. They are consulting many doctors regarding. Actually, rather than getting the answer as normal, they wants the doctor to say that something is abnormal with them. So even if we say that everything is normal, you can have you need not worry. They are not convinced. That is what we are seeing since the onset of the pandemic since last year. Two examples I would be quoting, sir. One patient, he is a 32-year male. What happened is after the onset of the lockdown, the last year, we had almost 3-4 months of continuous lockdown. This person was the software employee at Mumbai. So unfortunately or fortunately, he came here, and then the lockdown was announced, and everything was there. So he was stuck up there, and he has no connection with the friends and whatever. So suddenly the person after that, there was the colleagues of him of his company passed away. So they said that it is because of the stress, the during the work from home, the stress was going on, which led to this person resign his job. Since then, because he is not having, he is the what you call, he is not having anything. He started getting the what you call the dreams of that something would happen, that he will be having again the same course as his friend. So he almost all consulted around 10-15 doctors, and someone has to say that there is some abnormality is there, he needs treatment. So there was I was shocked to see that he was almost all having around 10 medications, and all the medications which are written are what you call the vitamin supplements and all like that. So even when we say that nothing is everything is normal, he consulted various doctors, various specialties, orthopedics, psychiatrists, and all that, and finally he developed what you call, because of the excessive reaction, he developed whole of the what you call severe erosive gastritis. We have sent him again for what you call rehabilitation center. Presently, after that, we do not know how is his patient. The other scenario is one of the what you call in a same family, the brother passed away, and the younger brother is worried that he would be having the same scenario, but the the elder brother passed away because of what you call the comorbidities he is having. He was having an uncontrolled hypertension and diabetes, but the younger brother does not have anything, but he is more of worried that something would happen, and he underwent angiogram around 4-5 times within a span of 2 years to know that whether he is having any abnormality or not. These are the two scenarios. One is very extreme. Even some patients want the doctor to say that there is some abnormality with him, and the other patient is what you call within the same family, and also we will be seeing and they will be going around the same investigations again and again to see whether there is any abnormality or not.
Yeah, this is like the case scenarios which you mentioned almost is kind of very typical, and I'm sure most of them have had similar experience of these things. So that
Sir, in the first case, actually after the patient I have seen almost all 6 times. At last I said that okay boss, you are having some abnormality. Because he was not convinced, he wants something to be written. At last, when in the last visit, when I have seen, he had 12 medicines. All are what you call the vitamin supplements and all like that, Pantop, Tryptomer, vitamin D, B complex, and all that. Metoprolol was there, and what you call some again multivitamin, different combinations. The zinc tablet was there. So but at last he wants that doctor tell some abnormality is there with me. So
yeah,
I was interested to hear from the what you call the psychiatrists how they will be dealing with this. So
yeah, with those demanding patients, when they particularly keep demanding whether everything is all right, your judgment or your decision making also becomes a bit tricky, and you are also sometimes forced to order some investigations and give them treatment. Probably this is why most of these patients get the same investigations done repeatedly and every time finding them to be normal. I can definitely relate to what you said. We'll take comments from Dr. Shankar. Dr. Shankar, sir, can you share your thought process and experience on dealing with such patients?
Good evening to all. We come across many cases in my 42 years of experience in the clinical field. We have seen plenty of cases who come after we lose our loved ones. We are prone to get some psychosocial problems. They may come, the phobias, anxiety, the fear, they are all quite common. But sometimes they come with acute stress reaction. Within 4 weeks they come. And sometimes they come with a protracted course of this stress disorder. What we say, it is as a post-traumatic stress disorder because of acute event, a loss of a colleague, or colleague has got myocardial infarction and suffering a lot. So even we see in this COVID era, we have seen many patients of this these psychotic. Many patients have come with the psychotic disorders, phobias, anxieties, fears, so all these things, and so much somatoform disorders. See, the index case with the non-specific symptoms and investigations are normal any number of times. So it comes under a somatoform disorder. They may present with the somatization, hypochondriatic behavior, hypochondriacal hypochondriasis. They come with body dysmorphic disorders, factitious disorders, malingering, even conversion disorders. Earlier we used to say they are hysterical, but now the term is conversion disorders, dissociative disorders. So these are all many psychiatric. They come with many psychiatric disorders, and we have to segregate them into mood disorders, the stress-related disorders, somatoform disorders, so dissociative disorders, and like that. And then the treatment of these particular diseases will be decided. So the dreaded complication of this generalized anxiety disorder, what we have come across is during COVID, my neighbor, he is an engineer, he is a father of a physician. He committed suicide because of fear of death. If he acquires COVID, it is not confirmed, but if he acquires COVID, so he had a lot of death anxiety, fear of death, and fear of the dying process. So the thanatophobia, I think, and so he committed suicide. So we know one case, one neurologist, probably Dr. Somarazu sir and seniors may be knowing. He was working in CDR hospital. He was diagnosed to have malignancy. So he thought of how the end stage will be in malignancy, and he committed suicide. He self-injected some opioid in a large dose, and he closed down the doors, and he written a letter thrown out into the veranda that it should be opened only after 3 days. After 3 days, he was no more. So, especially when I declared that the patient had HIV also, one couple, they committed suicide because thinking that their end stage will be horrible. So the dreaded complication I've seen is this generalized anxiety disorder, the thanatophobia, presenting as a suicidal tendency. So we have to, as a doctor, when the patient comes with schizophobia, anxiety, fears, and all these things, we will console them. Actually, we certain disorders, we may not cure them totally. At least we can comfort them mostly, and we can console them always. So this is my way of approach. I usually I sit with the patient and I console him a lot. Nothing to happen, nothing to worry. This talk therapy, probably the psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and psychologist, the team will discuss all these things. The talk therapy, it has got a very good role, because an experienced doctor tells that nothing will happen. Don't get worried. And if he console in that way, definitely the patient will be benefited. And cognitive behavioral therapy methods, the examples of problems to the solutions also we can explain to the patient. And recently, the relaxation techniques in the yoga and meditation, definitely the breathing exercises, the pranayama, and dhyana, meditation. So pranayama and meditation, definitely they will help a lot in these patients. And lastly, everybody thinks that for every ill there is a pill. So why don't you give pills, they say, but medication is the last, I say, because primum non nocere is our motto, do no harm. These patients, most of the times, they get benefited with the psycho-social and biopsychosocial model type of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. We can bring them normal. Those will be discussed, I think, in the foregoing session. So I say pill for every ill is not a correct thing. Pill also, because no drug in our pharmacy is without any adverse drug reaction, ADR. So the SSRI, SNRI, benzodiazepines, so many things we administer, but I come to know that these pills are they are dependent, and drug abuse will be there, and at the same time the pills will kill. We have seen many adverse drug reactions with some liver disorders, liver derangements, and so on and so forth. So these are my points I've come across, because once even if anybody dies of myocardial infarction, immediately the friends and relatives, they form a big queue line to the cardiologist or an experienced physician, and they insist for the ECG, 2D echo, and other investigations, in spite of telling that he is not having, for the even simple scratching pain or the pricking pain, pinprick pain, also they attribute it to myocardial infarction, and they get worried. So it is our prime duty to console them. These are my take-home points. I will get enlightened by psychotherapists and psychologists and the psychiatrists in this further discussion to get enlightened. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So most of these anxiety disorders can sometimes have an associated depression, and extreme forms of depression can have these suicidal tendencies. So the picture is pretty much mixed. So most of these so-called mental disorders need an expert guidance, and Obviously, when we are kind of sure that they are not having any particular organic disease, the first thing that it comes to mind is to refer to a psychiatrist. The biggest question or concern which I face at least is whenever we ask the patient to meet a psychiatrist, the facial expression changes as if they think that do you think I'm a mental kind of a picture. So we'll hear from Dr. Jyotirmayi. So Dr. Jyotirmayi, can you share your thought process on how do you deal these patients and how should we talk to the patients so that the psychiatrists or the psychologists are more approachable and they are not looked as something like a taboo kind of a thing, and how do we break this resistance where people do approach the so-called mental health specialists, so to say, and get them better. So Dr. Jyotirmayi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think this topic is
Dr. Jyoti, can you, we are not able to hear you loud. Can you be a bit loud, please? Maybe check
sure,
your
sir.
mic or something.
Is it audible, sir, now?
You are audible, but very faint. Maybe some problem with your mic or something, mic or headphones.
Now is it okay, sir?
More or less the same thing.
Okay, okay. So I'm trying to talk a little bit loud, but I guess there
Thank
is
you. Thank you.
some network issue, and I apologize for that. So coming to the current case scenario that you have explained, sir. So these usually the case scenario that you have told, it mostly comes under what we call, as Shankar sir has mentioned, hypochondriasis or under anxiety disorders. So the spectrum of anxiety disorders includes phobias, it includes generalized anxiety, it includes obsessions and compulsions, it includes hypochondriasis and other somatoform disorders. So here, when this particular person starts doing repeated investigations and sees repeated doctors, that is what we call as a compulsive behavior. So, and this compulsive behavior has a temporary relief for them, and they keep on doing it again and again. So firstly, we will have to understand, are there any triggering factors? We have to understand the past history of the patient, sir. Because many times if we probe and ask them about their childhood, or if we ask them about their parents, any kind of illnesses that their parents experienced, any untimely death in any of the family members. So usually in the childhood, many individuals, some trauma would have been there. And as they are growing also, the personality of the individual also is very important here. The personality, if it is mostly anxious, avoidant personality traits, if they have, especially harm avoidance personality traits, wherein their risk-taking behavior is less, and they resort to activities wherein less harm is there, where they plan things properly, where they require a lot of certainty. So any uncertainty makes them to feel very anxious. And the current COVID pandemic, if you see, there is uncertainty everywhere. So this has led to an increase and surge in the cases of these anxiety disorders. And coming to the how to approach the patient, how to reassure them, how to treat them. First of all, when we physicians, we understand what is this illness anxiety behavior, or what is hypochondriasis. If we can understand these symptoms, it becomes very easier for us to educate the patient. And like sir has mentioned, when we use this term of going, referring them to a psychiatrist, there's a lot of negativity in almost half of the individuals. They wouldn't feel comfortable, because here it is again about the sick role. Some individuals, they also get solace from being in the sick role, so they actually seek lot of reassurances. They like being reassured often. So that is the reason they often visit to the doctor. And also because of the technology being available, like Google and all that, so everything, too much of information, too much of knowledge, so everything they relate to the catastrophic events. So here the thought errors of an individual plays a very important role. So as we all understand, we all have some thought errors, but the individuals with hypochondriasis or fear of death will be having a thought error called as catastrophizing much. So any event, it could be a headache, it could be a mild chest pain. So they catastrophize it to the worst possible event. And what is the worst possible event is death. Another thought error they have is seeing everything in black and white, not able to accept the gray shades. That is, what they perceive is any health is complete absence of any pain, complete absence of any bodily symptoms. So even mild bodily symptoms, they become very uncomfortable. Their tolerance, their pain threshold tolerance will be very less. So that discomfort makes them to, see the doctor, and they want that complete absence of pain or any discomfort. So this comes with those individuals who are not able to accept the gray shades in their life. So that is one of the thought error that they'll be having. Another thing is personalization. In this case scenario, when the friend died of MI, this person relates it to himself and thinking that he will also die. So whatever bad event or the negative event is happening outside, they are personalizing to themselves. So this is another thought error. So most commonly, these are the three thought errors that we see in individuals who seek constant medical attention and constant fears in spite of all the investigations being normal and in spite of the doctors telling that everything is normal. So here, at times, even the doctor can get frustrated and irritated by repeatedly telling everything is normal, why do you want to come? And this actually makes the patient feeling even more worse, because they think that their symptoms are being minimized, and as if, the doctor is not paying proper attention to my problem and all. So what first we will have to make them understand is acknowledge that, yeah, they are suffering. We need to acknowledge that, yes, you're suffering. There's definitely pain. There's definitely problem of anxiety in you. And anxiety is nothing anxiety is something which is not visible, but there are physical symptoms that he's experiencing because of anxiety. So we need to make him understand about the stress response or the neurochemicals which are involved in anxiety, and how the body responds to anxiety, so that there is a medical reason we give with respect to anxiety. So psychoeducating him about anxiety and the body's response to anxiety can make him feel better. There is really something happening, but not that something he's imagining. And then after educating him, we need to also make him understand about the thought errors, like what I have told before, that these could be some of the thought errors that we all have and maybe you are having. And we need to also challenge the behaviors that he's resorting to, behaviors of getting investigations done repeatedly. And the more investigations we read, they keep on coming, there is temporary relief. So here again, the family members can be taken into confidence. So the family can be called and they can be educated if the patient is not ready to listen to the issue or accept his problem. So family members can be separately told, and help can be seeked. If not a psychiatrist, they feel more comfortable initially talking to a psychologist, like sir has mentioned. Maybe if the severity is not too much, sometimes the severity can go to such an extent that completely they leave their work life, they are not able to sleep, there is impairment in social functioning, biological functioning. And when they start having suicidal ideation because of all this, or complete extreme fear or phobia, then the medications can be prescribed, which we usually call it as SSRIs. So SSRIs are completely non-dependent medications. We have a separate group of drugs which we call as benzodiazepines or anti-anxiety pills. So they can be a little bit dependent, but we give them only on temporary basis. But for a longer duration, we usually prescribe SSRIs, and which are actually not dependent medications. But like I said, based on the severity, we prescribe the medications. And when the severity is little bit mild to moderate, we also ask the patient, ask their consent. And if they can see, talk therapy and psychotherapy is something that in the Indian setup, they need to give a lot of time and a little bit of financially also. For a few individuals, they might not be able to go for talk sessions like weekly twice and all. So we need to make them understand that, okay, if you can start with psychotherapy, or we call as CBT, cognitive behavior therapy sessions, where their thought errors and their abnormal behaviors can be challenged. And definitely there is improvement if the person is cooperative for the therapy session. So for therapy session, what is required is the patient's cooperativeness is also required. So I think proper approach by educating the patient, educating the family is what we can do. And if it is not, if the patient's symptoms are not increasing, then we can first refer them to a psychologist. And likewise, if medications are required, then they can be referred to a psychiatrist, where proper treatment can be given to the patient.
Thank you, Jyoti. Clarity of thought process of evaluating patient. You mentioned about the role of psychologist. We'll hear with one of the psychologists who has joined us. Dr. Taranya, can you share your thoughts, please?
So, like Jyoti ma'am said, I think mostly what we do in psychotherapy is very explained by Jyoti ma'am itself. We start yes.
Dr. Taranya, we could not hear you. Disturbance with the mic.
Probably there is disturbance with the mic. Dr.
Yeah.
Taranya, is it possible for you to use a different mic? No, there's a lot of static noise. Okay, ma'am, try again.
Yes, sir. Is it better now?
Oh no, you have got a lot of static in your voice. Your connection is okay. There is a lot of static in your mic.
So, I'm not sure what's going wrong here.
Ma'am, do you mind logging out and then logging back in again while we continue the discussion?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Okay, Praneeth, let us give her 5 minutes to log back in.
Sure. In the meantime, we'll try to take a few more comments or discussions from other things. We have Dr. Vijay Batina, who is a physiotherapist working at Uchwas. Dr. Vijay, do you encounter any of these patients while you are practicing, and do you have anything to share in this regard?
Hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me again here. Thanks to Dr. Praneeth sir. I also have a same. We tend to get these kind of patients, not quite often, but yes, they do come. Patients to us as a physiotherapist, we see mostly musculoskeletal kind of patients. So I'll share one interesting case which I've come across very recently, less than a month, I would say. So there's a patient who has event in his family where his father has expired with sudden cardiac arrest in his home place. So this patient is a 35-year-old male who have habit of smoking, kind of a chain smoking kind of a habit. So he also started getting chest pains of late, and he visited cardiologist in a hospital, and then he started diagnosing it why he's getting chest pain. Most of his tests are normal except lipids, and then few other parameters like treadmill test he cannot complete because of exertion. So he's a kind of a obese patient. So the consultant, the cardiologist has said, this is not, the pain is not coming from the heart, it must be muscular in origin. Try to do some exercises and all. He started doing some exercises, but eventually the pain is getting increased. So again, he visited a cardiologist, and cardiologist has said, please visit a physiotherapist so that they can teach you and guide you the exercises properly. So when he visited me at my clinic, so what I found with his history, he got a lot of anxiety. He got a lot of fear that because he says that sudden cardiac arrest and death is in his family. Like his grandfather has died the similar reason. His father also died the similar reason. And of late, after his father's death, his mother is also got diagnosed with angina, and then she's on medication. So that is his, and then after that he also developed a lot of anxiety, and somewhere he developed left-sided chest pain. That's when he started getting investigated, and then started consulting doctors at different places. He also did consultation at Care Hospitals, Medicover, and a lot of other good hospitals in Hyderabad. So the cardiologist they said this is not from cardiac. You have definitely higher lipids. You should start thinking of exercising and all. So when we have diagnosed, when we have assessed him, what we found is he got a condition called costochondritis, which is a condition which is because of inflammation to the ribs, particularly anterior chest wall, joints of anterior chest wall. That is chondrosternal pain people will have. So there's a lot of confusion he's having that this is also a chest pain, which is alarming him. So on palpation, on thorough examination, we found this is costochondritis, and we did counsel him. This is not actual cardiac pain, and we tried to tell him cardiac pain you cannot get this much length of time. You cannot keep walking with this kind of a pain that you have. So we tried to counsel his wife also. She's also in that myth that this is a cardiac pain, but nothing is coming out. So we told this is not cardiac pain. This is a costochondritis. This is because of the joint pain in anterior chest wall. So we tried to talk to him, and we also requested him to meet a psychologist for his smoking cessation program. Nevertheless, he didn't believe me also. He started investigating it further. He went to other hospitals in other states as well. Finally, recently he again called me back and saying that he wanted to try some therapy in relation to physiotherapy as a choice. So he has come, and we have used some techniques like TENS and some stretching exercises and thoracic mobility exercises. We also said this pain is not going to stop suddenly once you start exercises. It may aggravate a little because that you're stretching your protracted area. It may take a little more time, from weeks to months at times. Concurrently, you need to start undergoing this smoking cessation program from a psychologist. So it looks like he's believing this, but still he keeps texting me, asking me, "Are you sure this is not cardiac pain? How sure you are? How much sure you are?" And whenever he does this exercise, he says that the pain is aggravating, and he's perceiving the pain more when he does exercises. So then I asked him, "You can come down to the clinic whenever it is possible. We can, we can make you practice at our presence where you will be more relaxed." When he comes to clinic, when he does the practice, he doesn't really feel much of pain. He feel a lot of relaxation. But when he practices at home, particularly in the mornings, he says he is having a lot of left-sided pain, which is radiating to the left from the chest to the left hand, and he Googles it a lot, and then he says this is directly relating the symptoms that is towards cardiac pain. And he also used to ask his mother, this is a pain that he's also got. Since she also got an attack, she says, yes, this is a kind of pain I also got. So recently he has got his mother also saying that, see, this is the same with my mother, and then how do you say this is not cardiac pain? So I think as Dr. Jyotirmayi madam is saying, trust factor is very tough to build with them. Talk therapies at times works, and at times it utterly fails like this. Unless until they see significant reduction in their pain or things like that, I don't think they really believe that this is not chest pain, this is something else. So positively, I'm working with him. Let's see how it goes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Vijay, for sharing that case with me. We'll we'll try to take comments from Dr. Somraju from his comments because his experience will obviously count. So, sir, can we share your comments of how can we introduce psychiatrist to our patient? What should we talk and when should we refer, and how do we uh, get introduce psychiatrist to our patient? So, can we get your thoughts on this?
Before I say anything,
Sure.
Dr. Praneeth and Anup, will you tell them that we had a psychologist as part of our outpatient team?
Yes, sir. We had
Please
we had
explain that why we had it and how patients accepted it. After that, I'll talk.
Yes, sir. So we used to have one psychologist who was trained outside, who was a part of Dr. Somraju's team in outpatient, where all the patients who were seen by Dr. Somraju were made to be seen by the psychologist who could spend some time, know about the patient symptoms, and try to answer a lot of the questions and allay a lot of the anxiety which the patient had. And they could they were more satisfied because we as a clinicians were a bit busy, and most of those unanswered questions were kind of answered, and the level of satisfaction was much better post the meeting with the so-called psychologist who was available with the team.
Anyway, thank you, Praneeth. I think it's a very important area we are addressing now. Before we go to the type of patient you are describing, the importance of, say, psychological counseling, whether psychologist does it or a clinician does it, it is between them. And the way we train ourselves how to talk to them, important. Nearly 40 to 60% of patients are admitted into ICU with suspected MI or MI have depression. And by the time they go through various procedures, hospitalizations, interventions, or surgeries, the depression continues. So that's the reason why every major, say, specialty or overall any hospital which has multi-specialty practice should have psychologists as part of their teams. And a psychologist will play a significant role. And clinicians can learn from them and they can learn from the clinicians. They should have, our psychologists also used to see our inpatients. She used to follow our rounds also and talk to them in when we are there or not there also. So having said that, the type of patient you are talking about, there is some problem with the way medical education went on. If you recall our medical education, both some of you, your generation, our generation, or earlier generations, when a patient doesn't have anything organic, this patient is not spent enough time, not only in the outpatient, but also inpatient or whatever it is. And people even laugh it off. This fellow doesn't have anything. And the chief just laughs it off and goes on to the next bed. That's the way we are educated, actually. And it is these people who have the least of a problem with them, they require most of our time. And then, having said that, it's important. Eric Castle wrote a very nice book. He wrote one of the books, many books he wrote was on the nature of suffering. One must learn to distinguish between disease, illness, and suffering. Disease is one way. Disease is, as we know. Illness, some people suffer from the disease. And suffering need not have either disease or illness. It is in the mind. And how we deal with it, how we learn to counsel them, will depend upon the amount of time, the number of times, either as a clinician or a part of your team, a psychologist or psychiatrist, you may call them by any name. And we have to spend time with them. These people require to be spent more time, more number of visits, and if required, don't charge some of their visits, etc. Those are other components. And then that makes a difference to most of them. And having said that, say, when you say that the patient doesn't have anything, it's important to tell them the normal body functioning, that is what is called the normal pains of the body. And say, in our medical education, many of you brought in chest pain, both in undergraduate and postgraduate days. The coronary artery disease is never a case for you or for all of us. It is all disease or something else, hepatosplenomegaly, etc. So there's something inadequate in our training as to how we evaluate chest pain, how we interpret it. And earlier, when we were students, both in MBBS and MD, we used to have psychiatry posting as a part of our training. Now I come to know that is removed. That is the lack of understanding of what medical education has to be by the authorities concerned. They don't have the mind, they don't have the brain to understand. Psychiatry and psychology are extremely important. And there is a difference between psychiatry and psychology. And one of the psychologists can explain it. Psychology is going to be the most sought after specialty over a period of time. And I wish to hear more from psychologists. The psychologist you talked and who worked with us, she was trained at William James College of Psychology at Boston. William James was the father of psychology. Our psychologist will tell us. And hopefully we have more time, and some other time maybe we can discuss more. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for that comments. So, Dr. Taranya, I think you joined us. So I hopefully we can hear you. We have few more minutes left. So, can you share your thoughts before we kind of wrap up our session for today, as we are running short of time? Dr. Taranya.
Yes, sir. Is it clear now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. I think mostly what we do in psychotherapy for such kind of phobia was very well explained by Jyotirmay ma'am, like the whole process of psychotherapy, how it happens. Here, in addition to what was said today, yes, definitely the cognitive distortion. So the thinking error that Jyotirmay was ma'am was telling is a major part. So it just doesn't happen in a day. Maybe a person sees like someone having an heart attack in this case, and he starts thinking, okay, what if I have and what if I die, or a person of the age of 65 and above, where his friends or like the relatives, close relatives starts to expire, is like, okay, maybe I'm on the list. So that is when such kind of thinking comes, and it develops in over a period to this. So if they are having a stronger social support system, that can be diluted. If not, the severity increases. So we focus on the cognitive distortion, that is the irrationality there. And as a psychotherapist, we try to put in some logicality, some reality into it through the talk therapy. And as it is quite severe, because thoughts doesn't appear, thoughts comes from a strong belief system. So to question that belief system, it would take some time. So the psychotherapy plan for such cases can be long, not a shorter span where like 1 or 2 sittings are enough. So approximately it can take more than 6 sessions. So longer duration in this case is a challenging thing, and that is definitely needed. And I think as primary consultants, first telling them, or not psychoeducating them, but telling them why there is a need and how it can help them benefiting if they are getting into a psychotherapy, can be much appreciated, because we don't find clients coming to us directly, or as there is a taboo, they don't come to us. So when primary consultants encourage it, and when they give a clear view of how it is affecting them, I think that can be more effective, and that can be more educating for the patients to reach us. And in addition to the therapies, we also do like alternatives like creative arts therapy or music therapy, where it helps them to divert, and where it helps them to indulge in other more positive lifestyle or more routine based work where they can avoid the triggers. For example, right now COVID is going on, and as sir said, if they are having the fear and when they read the news or when they see people, like most of them are talking about how many deaths in this state and how many people are dying there and things, it can trigger them to have panic attacks. So avoiding those triggers to such techniques will also help them, and that can also be adapted by the doctors as well, like telling them how to avoid the triggers by engaging in a more resourceful routine on a daily basis. Yes, sir. This is what I wanted to convey today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Taranya, for that sharing your thought process. I would like to know, like, the two contacts which I could know I have already invited. Like, can you tell us, do we have any centers or people around whom we can reach to frequently in and around Hyderabad city, where at least I practice? How do we reach to you people? How many are there, and how can we reach you frequently?
In and
Taranya?
around Hyderabad, I am not very aware of the psychological centers here, sir. I'm very sorry, but I think in Tamil Nadu, there many psychiatric specialized hospitals are there, and also clinical psychologists where they practice their practices alone in a private clinics are available. So, and having an in-house psychologist in such cases, or someone who will analyze them, or who knows that okay, this is this phobia, or this is malingering, and this can be more effective in case of specialized or multi-speciality hospital.
Dr. Praneeth, I have to add here, even if I am misunderstood, I must say not to have an in-house psychologist is a wrong medical practice today.
Yes, sir. I agree with you. Dr. Jyotirmay, can you give some information?
Yes, sir. So, as far as all the multi-specialty hospitals, I think the psychiatrists and psychologists are available at the main bigger hospital setups. And separately in Hyderabad, we have specific psychiatric establishments as well, hospitals. Some of the few, the bigger ones are, one is we have Asha Psychiatric Hospital, which is at Banjara Hills. And another we have in Secunderabad, we have Chetana Hospital. So, so like that, I think in each and every region of Hyderabad, there are psychiatric clinics. But these are the ones which also have the inpatient facilities and a group of psychologists and psychiatrists. And I think in Hyderabad, in and around, there are quite a number of psychiatrists and clinical psychologists practicing, sir.
Praneeth, again, sorry for interfering in between. Psychiatry
Yes,
is
sir.
trying to rediscover itself. It's lost its way. Don't mix up psychiatry and psychology together now. They are different now.
Sure, sir. Sure. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jyoti, for that information. I think we are 8 minutes past 8 o'clock. So as we are kind of running short of time, I think this definitely is something which is important. And one of the things which I also found out is the so-called anxiety equally in the doctors right now with the COVID. Those doctors who are particularly dealing with COVID patients in critical care, emergency, and probably pulmonology physicians and critical care physicians, I could see they also experiencing this thing. So definitely a much needed thing where we need to take help, and probably I think we can just keep on discussing about this topic. But anyway, for the want of time, I think we should close it right now. Dr. Anup, your final comments, and probably from then we can close this session for today.
Thanks, Praneeth. Yeah, this topic is very important, and it is even more important for the fact that we don't discuss about it much. And a few things that I would summarize from today's discussion, and a couple of points that I want to add. So I think it is pretty much clear that a lot of these patients, they require our time, they require our attention, they require more time than what probably an MI or an angina would require. They require more frequent visits. So these patients either, depending on what your hospital policies are, you can probably bring them before the second prescription fee triggers, or you can give them kind of a concierge medicine kind of practice. I don't know if that works in India or not, where you can give them kind of a monthly subscription where they can come 2, 3 times, 4 times a month, just to vent themselves out. But regardless of whichever model we choose, they do need frequent visits to reassess their symptoms and also for the counseling. The concept of in-house psychologist had been brought up multiple times, and it would be a dream come true if all the major clinical units, and I would say clinical unit, not a particular clinic, because it would be practically impossible to connect one psychologist with one clinic. But when you have a clinical units, like in hospitals, you have got a cardiology unit or a gastro unit or whatnot. If psychologists are tied to particular units who can manage some of these patients, that would be a dream come true. The other dream come true would be when a patient comes to our room, and if we feel that these patients do need support with the psychologist, then rather than patient stepping out of the room and going to a psychologist's room, if doctor can step out of the room and have psychologist enter that room, so that way the hesitancy of patient getting out and having a second thought of whether he or she needs to meet a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that would obviously be a dream come true. And this is something which I don't perceive that difficult to put in place. Of course, it requires a lot of intention and a lot of groundwork. In my training, because what Praneeth brought up was this professional anxiety and all this. In my cardiology and general medicine training, we have a preemptive psychology session, like burnout sessions and whatnot, where residents were mandated to attend such sessions. The idea here was that there is a background depression and anxiety amongst residents. And rather than the symptoms coming up full flare where the residents start manifesting in terms of cynicism and whatnot, it is better to preemptively treat them with psychology sessions. And it wasn't really a one-to-one session, but more of a group session in form of lectures or group therapy or whatnot, where you are trying to tackle this problem before it actually becomes full-blown. A similar thing can be addressed in our routine practice, be it doctors or be it patients, where one can already see that if there is a premature demise or sickness in a family, then you can pretty much predict that their family members are going to have some sort of concerns. Or in the offices where this is of course not our prerogative, but something that offices can handle, where you have, let's say, a 50 employee office and in one of them has any kind of problem, then a preemptive psychotherapy session can start for rest of the employees in a group manner, so that these diseases, they don't flare up to a certain extent. And the same thing can be practiced for doctors as well as for the patient. So I think that a lot of these things are missing link, a lot of these things which obviously make sense, but for the reasons that is quite obvious to a lot of us, these things, they don't happen as much. The good thing is we are talking about it. The good thing is that this is a good start for us, where at least we talk about it. And even if we start incorporating a portion of it in our individual clinical life, hopefully one of us or few of us will succeed in making both structural as well as thought changes in how we practice medicine, not just super specialty cardiology, but it spans pretty much every single aspect of medicine, be it general medicine, internal medicine, non-invasive cardiology, you name it. Across all the specialty, I think this has got a very critical role. I'm glad that we had experts talking today, and we had few seniors sharing their thought process. But Praneeth, this is all in all what I can summarize. If there is no more questions or comments, I think we can close, but you can take up from here.
Yeah, so thank you, Anup, for summarizing up. I would thank everyone for joining the session and sharing their thought process. Weekly Huddle, currently we have changed the timings from 7 to 8. So the same link will be continuing. So most of them who have joined, the same link will be there. The timings will be 7 to 8, and we will be continuing 7 to 8. We would request you to share the weekly huddle program with your colleagues as well, where the intention is to share ideas and learn from each other. So until next time, thank you all. Good night, and please take care.